Hello there. This is the third installment of the behind the scenes stuff that I'm putting together for some Spark AR effects for Instagram. I am focusing on these things basically just to give some other people some inspiration or some ideas. When I watched some videos when I first started, people did things and it was like, oh man, totally, like it clicked. Like, oh dude, that's exactly what I needed to do to make this thing just that much better. So what I hope is, as I walk through this stuff, you can learn some things, or at the very least, you can leave me comments and say, "Hey, dumbass, you're doing that completely wrong," which is totally fine. So I only learned this stuff really just a few months ago, if we in the grand scheme of things. So I'm along the journey with everyone else. One thing that's great, I just want to give a really good, really important shout out to all of the Instagram team for their promptness and attentiveness to everyone who is part of this program. There's a lot of stuff to work through when it comes to beta testing things. There's a lot of, it can't be too big because you don't want 3,000 people submitting the same bug. It's really hard for a team of, 10 people to go through. So you have to keep the team small, and there's a lot of frustrations about the teams being small and people wanting access and all kinds of stuff. So I want to give them a shout out because whenever we have a problem, I mean, it's like sometimes it's like 10 o'clock at night, and you'll get an update on it. It's pretty cool how attentive and serious they take everything, because honestly, we take it pretty serious too. I can see the power in the what this can all lead to, and how this augmented reality stuff kind of bridges the gap, so to speak, between the hardware limitations of headsets and all that. So social augmented reality is something that I think is really important. It's going to be very important in the next coming years. So as we get into this, as I talk about how these effects work, I'll probably talk a little bit about that stuff too. So hopefully I don't bore everyone. I know some of you are kind of creators. Some of you might not even understand what the hell language I am saying right now, or what I'm actually saying because you don't speak my language. That's fine. Hopefully what you're watching will be universal enough to understand what's going on. So today I am going to be talking about an effect that I built called Automaton. I released this effect maybe 2.5 months ago, something like that. It's one of my more popular effects. It started off as a beauty filter, so I wanted to kind of branch out and do something I was uncomfortable with. So I wanted to do some stuff with skin smoothing and some other random things, but still put my own spin on it. So this is what it ended up as. It's still probably not what anyone would consider a beauty filter. But that's the concept, and there's some of the very similar concepts behind beauty filters behind this. So if you're building a beauty filter, or complex face mask effects, this might give you some help as to how to achieve this stuff. So let's dive right in. First, we're going to start with what this effect actually does. One of the things that this effect does is it tracks your face. As you can clearly see, this thing is tracking my face. I have this kind of glowing circuitry wrapped across my nose, the bridge of my nose, even across the tip of my nose here. And I have some spinning lights, as you can see. If I just sit still, you can see there's some spinning lights that are going on. If you look over here on the side, and you can see this yellow area up here, there's actually multiple lights spinning. Altogether, there are 4 directional lights, and they are all rotating at different speeds and times, and they're all different colors. So you can see that there's some lights moving on there as well. And then, of course, there's my eyeballs, which are bright white. So my eyeballs are being replaced. Some other things that are going on behind the scenes here are my eyes are actually slightly larger than they are in real life. I bumped them up 20%, and also, there are multiple colors to this. So every time I click my eyeballs, I can actually change colors here. So here's a blue eyes and my regular eyes, and then gold eyes, and then white eyes. So, and then I can also click my face and change the color of the circuitry. So there's 2 tap events in this. There's an area above here which is this thing here called eye toggle, which you can see, hopefully see here with this purple line. It's about this big, and it sits directly in front of my eyes, and it's just a flat plane. And if anyone taps that flat plane, it will change the material on my eyes. So that's kind of one cool thing that you can do that a lot of people don't really think about, is you can have these invisible buttons that sit around areas that you can tap on. You don't have to have big obvious things, but you can have these invisible buttons that when people tap on can affect other areas. So you don't actually have to tap on an object to change the material. You can tap on a big invisible thing in front of it. So that's really helpful with things that are small. Like if they're very tiny on the screen, you don't want people to, have to get in there and try to get their finger, make a big button in front of it. It's pretty helpful. So that's what's going on with there. So there's an eye toggle, and then I have a face toggle, which is basically just tapping my face mesh. Anytime my face mesh is tapped, it will change that circuitry. So let's start with the eyeballs. We're going to start from the very bottom layer, and we're going to work our way all the way up. So the very base layer of this are these white eyeballs, or whatever color I want to make them, but right now they're white. This is actually a full face mesh. So as you can see my face mesh here, really floating around. This face mesh that you see here is actually 5 face meshes layered on top of each other. The first one is just eyeballs. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and just toggle the visibility of these. We're going to hide the circuitry. We're going to hide our cheeks. We're going to hide our skin smoothing. And we are going to hide my face texture that I'm actually taking out of here. And then we're left with just some white, floating white eyes. So all this is a transparent PNG with just the white colored in. That's all. I just have the white colored in. And then for every material I have, I just use these as an alpha, and I make a color on top of them. So for blue, these turn blue, and then for red, they turn red, etc. So this is actually a fully functional face. This is actually a full face mesh. It's just alphaed. So if I were to change this to, for instance, skin smooth. Oh, I can't do skin smooth, sorry. If I were to change it to, let's do circuit phase 5. You can see the whole face mesh. You can't see my face on there, but you can see the face mesh is on there. So, or we can do face texture. Boom. Okay. So you can see that there's actually a face mesh where these eyeballs are, but we don't want the eyeballs. We do want the eyeballs, but we want these eyeballs in particular. So these eyeballs in particular are going to be our oops, not eyeballs 4. Sorry. I do all this live, so I apologize for my mistakes I might make as I walk through this. So so there you go. So we have our all of our different layers are on now, but you can see how the eyeballs are all the way at the bottom. So the eyeballs actually, if I go back to this face mesh over here, so we have I can actually turn this back off again, because what the hell? You guys are watching with me. Why not just turn them back off again? We'll turn these back off, and then we'll get just to the eyeballs, just the floating eyeballs. You can see there, they're gold right now. Let's go ahead and tap on them and give them a white look. Whoa. Okay. So so there you go. So there's my white eyeballs, and they're just sitting back there. But if you go over here and you look at this thing, I'm actually using a morph object, a deformation object that has blend shapes built into it. So what the hell does all that mean? So if you download Spark AR, there's a tutorial called face deformation. I believe that's what it's called. Let me see. Window. It is called. Right here, face distortion. Sorry, it's this one right here with this beautiful blonde girl. Back and forth. You can almost can't even really tell that her face is distorted, but she does have a distorted face. Her cheeks are a little puffed out. So that actually has a blend shape inside of it. So if you open that up and you save it as a new project and then go into the folder, you'll see that there's an object in there. There's an FBX file. And that FBX file, you can actually go over here and add it to your deformation. You can add it to your face mesh, and it'll give you all of these options to adjust all of this stuff. So this allows me to adjust how large my eyes are, where the Z index of my eyes are. So I can make them pop out of my head. I can make them really big. I can make my nose really small. I don't even have to use these sliders. I can actually go the opposite direction and do like -10 and make my nose pinch in on itself. This is a pretty cool tool. So, and this comes with Spark AR. A lot of people don't realize that you can save the tutorials out and get the objects and stuff out of them and use them in your projects. They do that on purpose. So yeah, so I'm using really everything so far is directly from Spark AR, except for this PNG with my eyeballs. So I use that deformation object, and actually I use that on every single face mesh that I have. So if I turn my other face meshes on, you'll see that this deformation object is over here. Skin Smoother actually doesn't take a deformation object, but that's okay. I don't need it. And then we're going to go back here and turn all of these back on. So now we're back left with our fully functioning effect. The only thing I don't have on right now is this emitter, which I'd like to talk to you guys about. So you can see here that I have this emitter. Back up. And there's all these particles that are here. The emitter looks great, but on an iPhone 6, the emitter is basically like a filter killer. So I think probably what I'm going to do is delete the emitter entirely and just say there's going to be no particle effects on this one at all. We're just going to have a face mask. So we're going to go ahead and do that right now. And we're going to submit this at the end. So that's how the eyeballs work. The next thing is going to be the face. So the whole point of my face is that if I don't have my face on here, then it doesn't quite track properly. So what I want to do is I want to make sure that I have a face object, a face mesh that's sitting in here. That allows me to, if I don't have my face mesh sitting in here, then what I can't do is I can't properly blow my eyes out again. So I want to increase my eye shape all the way across the board on every single face mesh. But if I don't have a copy of my own original face with my eyes bigger, then all the other face meshes are going to have big eyes except for what my face looks like. So I don't want to do that. So I need to have a copy of my own face and then alter it. So that's what this is. So this is a copy of my own face. It sits on top. I have my eyes taken out. That way I can have this pass through of this gold or white or whatever color my eyeballs are at the time. So I have that pass through on this face mesh, and every other one of these has a pass through on the eyes. So I can get that pass through with the eye color. And we could do mouth too if we wanted to, but we don't need to do mouth. So essentially, when you get to this point, all that we're doing here is we're just taking our face texture, which you can extract a face texture up here by selecting your face tracker. And going over here to texture extraction, you can click this button and it will create a texture down here that you can apply to a material. So if you apply that to a material, which I think this one's called face, and I call it called face texture, and I have it applied here, make sure that it's flat. If it's not flat and it's standard, it gives this really, it's subject to lighting effects. There's all kinds of things going on. So make sure it's flat. Flat will blend in. You can't tell anything. It'll look just like the background. So use your face texture, make it flat. And then once you do that, you can take a face mesh. You can insert a face mesh, literally just insert face mesh. And then once you do, you can take your face mesh and apply your new texture to it. And then you will have a copy of your face. Then you can add this deformation morph object and boom, you can make your eyes bigger. So when I say bigger, I mean like I can really make these guys really, really quite a bit bigger. I don't want to make them that big because I'm trying not to get too cartoony with it. Maybe on another effect. I didn't necessarily like it with this one. So then we're going to move on to our next face mesh. So now we're thinking, okay, the bottom is the eyeballs. The top is the copy of the face with the eyeballs a little bit bigger and the eyeballs cut out. The next copy on top of that is skin smoothing. So skin smoothing is going to, as it says, smooth my skin out. So all this does is it just takes kind of like a red layer and puts it on top. Skin smoothing is an interesting thing. You basically use this skin smooth material. When you select a face mesh, you can actually select that as one of the type of shader types as retouching, and use this skin smoothing thing here to control how much skin smoothing you actually want. because of what this was supposed to be an android or some sort of a robot. I wanted to give a nice smooth skin. So usually I'm trying to stay away from those because it ends up sometimes making the face a little too blurry. But this one's okay. So we'll bump it down a little bit. We'll go to 78%. So the next layer is going to be cheeks. And this is yet another face mesh sitting on top. So just keep thinking this face you see floating around in front of here, there's actually 5 things located on top of this. So the next one is going to be cheeks. So cheeks is a little weird. So what cheeks does is if I turn my cheeks visibility off, you'll be able to tell immediately. You'll notice that the reflection on my skin of the lights that are spinning is gone. So if I turn it back on, boom, I get this nice, smooth, cool lighting effect. And back on and back off. So how do I do that? Well, the first thing you want to do is you need to make your own. Material. So it's hard to tell from what this looks like, but down here I've actually made my own in Photoshop cheeks highlight with airbrushing. So you can actually go up to Window and then do a project and do, where is it at? Oh, help. I'm sorry, it's help, and get face reference assets. This is going to open up and it's going to ask you where it wants to save it. So we'll just go ahead and just say screw it. We'll put them on the desktop. So it's going to put a folder on your desktop called reference face. Inside of this, you're going to have all of your FBX files, and your inside of this, you're going to have all of your meshes. So you're going to be able to play with your you're going to be able to see how these work, and you're going to be able to alter these the way you need to, so you can create your own blend shapes. Pretty cool, right? And there's just multiple copies of these, depending on how you want to pull them in. And then there's also the head occluder. So the head occluder is something that I've gone over in a past thing. They've kind of altered it now to remove the face. I kind of like the old head occluder better, but I understand why this one's here. It just has less detail. Okay, so what we're really going after here are the texture. So now that I've extracted this from Spark AR, this reference face, go into the textures folder and you're going to see these flattened faces. So this is actually how this texture comes out. So one thing that's really handy is you can actually open this JPEG of this man or woman in Photoshop, create a new layer on top of it, and just draw on top of it, and that's how it will layer across your face. So this will give you reference assets for you to basically draw anything you want to on top of a face mesh. It's super, super, super handy to have these. Super, super handy. So, and you'll notice that there's also like face mesh trackers. I mean, there's even effects that have just like literally taken this face mesh thing and pulled it in and put it on top of your face. So, I mean, that stuff all just kind of comes with it. It's pretty crazy. So what I'm getting down to is I get down to the cheeks, right? So I need to make this cheeks thing, which you can see down here. The way that the cheeks works is I took this image here and I just airbrushed on the top of the head right here, all the way around where the cheeks are, and basically created all my own highlights where I thought highlights would be if a light was shining down from the top, because I wanted this to reflect in a certain way. Make sense? So I use that in my material, which I think is called cheeks. Yes, it sure is. And I make it metallic. I can even make it shiny if I want to. I try not to make it too shiny because there's already quite a few shiny mask effects out there. And I'll even use a little bit of this ORM texture and some occlusion, and then an environment texture as well to give it a little bit more. And then, so what all this does? What does all this mean? See, I can bump it up a lot here, and I can really get some pretty wild lights on here, which is kind of cool. But I don't know that I want to go quite so heavy into it. We'll bump it up a little bit. How about that? So that's how the cheeks part of it works. That allows me to basically control highlights on my face. So that just gives it just a little more of effect, a little more of a glossy effect. And just think about also, because I'm using transparency, I'm not getting this cutoff effect around the outside that you see on some masks. You'll see a lot of masks that have around the outside here where the mask will end. Well, to prevent that, all you have to do is create a new PNG, use your reference asset, which you can see here, and just fade it out before it gets to the edge. So if you fade it all out before it gets to the edge, then it'll fade out on your mask. Make sense? It's all about the alpha channels. honestly. So the next layer on top of this, which is the absolute final face mesh, is the circuitry. The circuitry, again, all I did was, I'm going to show you what this looks like down here. Hopefully I can. It's called Face 2. Yeah, it's kind of hard to see, but essentially this is the same thing. What I did was I took these face reference assets and I drew circuitry on top of them. So I took this and I just started and I literally just cut it in half and drew circuitry on one. In fact, I didn't even draw it. I took it from the internet, took pieces of it, built it, and then overlaid it the way that I wanted to, cut it in half and then repeated it on the right side, and then just exported it as a transparent PNG and then exported it and then overlaid it on my face mesh. The way that I get the reflections to work on this is by using, we can pick any one of these, we'll just pick this one here, is by using a physically based material, using an environment texture that gives us our good reflective characteristics where we can get that cool gold foil effect. And then also because it is metallic, I'm able to take those spinning lights that are spinning out there in the distance, and then that metallic stuff, just the metallic stuff, will pick that up. So there's actually areas on my face where I don't have the cheeks, which are kind of over here, where when I turn, you can still see that the lights pick up. Pretty cool. So I think it's these kind of like small attentions to detail and just taking your time with it. Not that I'm saying that this effect is incredible or anything, but you can tell the difference between someone who is just putting one face mesh on there with an image and just trying to do it all with one image. Don't do it all with one image. You got to layer them. And honestly, you got to tinker with it a little bit. Sometimes when you have multiple face meshes on top of each other, I have to space mine out on a Z index just ever so slightly so they don't overlap, and so they're not all in the same, have the same Z property. That same Z value is going to create Z-fighting, which is commonly what you'll see. You'll see flickering sometimes when things are like next to each other or on top of each other, and they're kind of fighting to be on top. That's a technique, or that's a problem called Z-fighting. It's very common in augmented reality. It's very common in layout design. Honestly, you'll if you know anything about CSS and you've ever used relative or absolute positioning, then you know about Z indexing. Same thing. So exactly the same. So your Z index is essentially your layering system. So all of these face meshes have a slightly different Z index than the previous one does. You'll notice that this one over here is 0.1, this one's 0, this one's 0, this one's 0. So bad example. This one actually doesn't have it, but the eyeballs do. So the eyeballs actually sit a little bit back behind all the rest of the face mesh. So that's actually good, and the eyeballs, I believe, are slightly larger. The reason for that is because I don't want any bleed through. So I want this white that's here to just overtake everything, or whatever color that's going on here. So there's kind of our gold foil or silver foil. Whoa! All right. So that's how all the face meshes work. So that's how all the face tracking works. So let's get into the lights. The last part that we're going to talk about here afterwards is going to be the scripting of how we tab, and then we're going to submit this guy. So the lights I've done all with a patch editor. So patch editor is great with Spark AR. You don't have to do any kind of coding at all. I have to admit the patch editing on this it could be a little bit better, but who cares? It works just fine. So what I'm doing is I'm looping an animation. I have a duration of 1 second for one light, 2 seconds for another light, 4 seconds for another light, and 3 seconds for another light. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So if you think about what that means is I have 4 lights. They're all spinning at a different rate. I also have 2 of them spinning 180 degrees before they reset, and the other ones are spinning, and then one's spinning 365, and another one's spinning 180 degrees again. So all that means is that they're all spinning at different rates. Some of them are doing one's doing a full rotation, the other ones are doing half rotations, more than a full rotation actually. So what this transition thing does here is it does all the math for me. So all you can do is just all you have to do with these is just drag and drop these type of things, these little blocks here, and when you have a whole library available to you that you can use. If you just right click here, quite a few things that you can do and things that you can watch. You can actually pull in the whole face tracker. You can see how many faces are on the thing. You can tell if someone's mouth is open. This thing basically replaces scripting as far as it's concerned. So So what I'm showing you here, though, is just probably a pretty dirty version compared to people who are much more adept at using the patch editor. But this will get you 4 lights, and they'll get you spinning lights. So and you can put more lights or less lights if you want. So I could run this all with one loop animation, one transition, and put them all to the same light. I could simplify this a lot, but I wanted each light to kind of do its own thing, just because I wanted more control over it as I was fine-tuning it. So that's how the lights work. Not a whole lot to that. In order to get the lights to work, all you have to do is click over here, and then when you get to rotation, click that guy, and that will create this, and then you can connect everything over here. So you can see when I click him, this is it right here. So I can go over more details with the patch editor in another tutorial. This is a little more in depth than I was planning on getting with this thing. But let's move on to the scripting so we can get to the publishing. So that's how the lights work. Scripting. Here's our scripts. Amazingly, this thing is only 54 lines long. That's pretty cool. We could make it a lot shorter if we wanted to, but for legibility, I wanted to keep things the way they are. So I'm going to go through each of these really quickly. So up at the top here, we have our modules that we bring in. Modules are all with Spark AR. You can look up all the different modules that there are. There's some great ones. There's face tracking. There's all kinds of stuff. We don't need any of that. We just need, the scene module, which allows us to pull objects from the scene. And then we need the materials module to basically pull materials in and then set materials, and then touch gestures, so we know that people are tapping on our eyeballs and tapping on our face mesh. Pretty exciting, right? So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to set what our face mesh is. So our first thing we're going to do is say our top face mesh, which is the circuitry, because that's on the very top. We're going to call that face. So anytime someone taps on that circuitry face mesh, which is all the way on the top, that's what we want to call it. So we're going to call this, so our var for this is face. Our next one, which we could actually use this as a constant. This was written really before I had a super great grasp of what I should be doing here. So anyway. The next step would be to set your eyeball. So this is our eye toggle. So this is our plane. So whenever anyone taps on this var eye, I want to be able to change the eyeballs. So if you think about what we're doing here, we have one variable here that we're going to be using for the tap for the face. One object we're going to be using for the tap. So anytime someone taps on that face mesh, it's going to change the material of that face mesh. So I only really need one reference because I'm tapping on the object and I'm changing the material of the exact same object. The difference with the eyeballs is that I'm tapping on a plane that goes in front of the eyes to change the eyeballs, which is actually a face mesh. So there's 2 different objects involved there. So I have one object here for the face and 2 objects for the eyes. I tap on the eye to change the eyeball color. I tap on the face to change the face. Does that make sense? So now I'm going to create an array of all the different colors that I have. So I did a pretty bad job of naming these. I probably should have just named them the colors. Who gives a shit? So this is our array for our materials, for our eye materials. These are all the different ones that we've created. As you can see here, these match the exact same names that are down here. We have eyeballs 1, eyeballs 2, eyeballs 4, eyeballs 3, eyeballs 6, eyeballs 7. Great, here they all are, right? So these are all the materials for that. All the different circuits are also located here. So I can make it, multiple materials for the same thing. So now I basically have these arrays of all these different materials that are sitting inside of here. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set an on tap gesture for the entire screen, not just for the face mesh, I guess, is how I did this instead of doing that. So ignore what I said previously regarding of tapping on the face. We could tap on the face if we wanted to. Apparently I made it to where we could tap on the whole screen. That's great. So we tap on the whole screen, that will toggle the face material. We tap just on the eye plane, that will toggle the eye material. So all we need to do here is we know how many materials we have, or everything with arrays with JavaScript is going to be a 0 index, meaning that everything starts at 0. So this is 0, this is 1, this is 2, this is 3, this is 4, this is 5, this is 6. So as far as this thing is concerned, once we get to 6, we're done, even though there's 7 of them because we started at 0. So, so that's what we're doing here. So you can see anything greater than 6 So I basically just say, okay, we're starting at 0. This is where we're starting. Every time someone taps on this, I want you to switch to this material and then increase this number so I know where I'm at. So instead of 0, now I'm on 1. So I know that this is the next one. Then I increase it. This is the next one. Increase it. This is the next one. If you've done any kind of JavaScript programming, any kind of programming ever, this is pretty basic stuff, but this is helpful to know if you don't know. So essentially what we're doing is we're just increasing this number each time we click on it. Well, once we get beyond 6, we don't want to keep increasing the number because we're out of materials. We're going to end up throwing an error. So that's what this little piece of code here at the beginning does. If this material index is greater than 6, then just reset it back to 0. Oh, and by the way, set this to 0. So this will be face mat 0, which will be face mat 0, which will be the first one. So this basically resets everything. Once it gets to the end, it resets everything. All you have to do is just make sure you keep this number in line with however many things you have in your array. We know that there's 7 items in this array, so this is 6, again, because it's a 0 index. We know that there's 6 items in this array, or 6 items in this array, so we know that this is 5. So that's all that is. I have a little bit of extra code in here, to be honest with you, because when I am going through and replacing this with my regular eyes, there's one of these materials has a pass-through that shows my regular eyes. I need to be able to take a blend shape and then shrink it down to where my eyes don't look like my eyes will look very strange because I don't want them to be gigantic. I want them to be normal. So this is kind of a way to reset this and just say, if this is kind of a fallback, it's kind of a cheat. I don't know that I necessarily need to go over it, but I can if anyone has any questions. But this is basically a cheat for if I have a regular set of eyes in there. I prefer doing this because I'm basically moving my z-index slightly different, and I feel that it looks a little better once it's z-indexed differently. Other people might not feel the same way, so I'm not going to get too much into that. This is kind of a personal preference thing. So beyond that, we have the exact same thing here. Hey, look, if this is greater than 6, then we're gonna reset it. Else, go ahead and just set this and increase the number. So I'm tracking 2 things here. I got 2 numbers I'm tracking. I'm tracking this mat index 1 and this mat index 2. What does that mean? So that means I'm tracking an index of materials for this guy and an index of materials for this guy. Every time somebody clicks, I want to keep track of where they are in this list. Make sense? And then every time they hit the end of it, I want to reset it back to 0. That way it just cycles through. They get to 6, they get to 0. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 0. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 0. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 0. Over and over and over again. So that's how that all works. And that's how you get an effect where you can sit there and you can tap on it over and over and over again. And it's just going to get to that point to where you can cycle through things. And then, of course, you can always tap on the screen and cycle through these guys as well. So that's it. That's the whole thing. That's the whole walkthrough. Pretty easy, right? I will say that this is not the most advanced thing in the world. There's very little scripting in this. And it's more attention to detail on the face mesh part and trying to get that right and trying to get different types of lighting effects right. So that's where the beauty filter comes in. So one of the most popular filters on Instagram is by a wonderful human being named Joanna. Or Jauska, I guess you would say her name on Instagram. Her filter is called Beauty 3000. She's been interviewed by Vogue Italia and just went to the Louis Vuitton fashion show in Paris. She's kind of a minor celebrity for her work building these effects. But what's interesting is the effect that she's most known for, Beauty 3000, can actually be replicated, can be built fully from beginning to end in Spark AR in about 30 seconds. So, and that's not a dig on Joanna by any means. The genius behind being a creator is knowing when to stop. A masterpiece can go on forever if you let it. So if you know where to stop, and even if it's simple, even if it's Andy Warhol, with the Campbell soup cans, that guy was a genius because he knew where to stop and he knew what was going to resonate with people. And that's what makes Beauty 3000 so effective. It's not that it's hard to build. You saw how I've been doing this. This stuff isn't super hard. But it's not the difficulty. It's knowing the beauty in it, knowing the effectiveness and what it is. Because I'll tell you, other people have copied that, but they haven't copied it the same way, and it's not as effective. One, it's a copy, so everyone knows it is, but it also speaks to having a skill set that is beyond programming or beyond 3D modeling. There's a skill set that's up here that has to do with like how to talk to people, how fashion works, how people express themselves on a daily basis. Making a makeup filter that switches my lips and mascara is sort of impressive, but I've seen it 1,000 times now, and I don't want to build one of those. Other people can, that's fine, but I personally prefer to kind of build things that I haven't seen before, and it has nothing to do with difficulty. The makeup effects can sometimes be pretty difficult to get right, to be honest with you. So it has nothing to do with difficulty. It's just kind of where I want to go with what I do and how I look at the future of this stuff. So just to say, you can take all these techniques and you can make something pretty cool and you can get famous off of it, weirdly enough. And you can take a quarter as much time and effort as I have. But it all is knowing what you like and having that visual eye of knowing where to stop, what looks good, and what's going to resonate with people. So I hope that all of that made sense. So right now we're just going to go ahead and export this guy while we're sitting here. There we go. Now it's moving slightly. I guess we had some image compression we needed to handle. Almost done. So you can see this effect, not that big, honestly. We're looking at about 2.4 megs. Tiny. So tiny. So let's export this. We'll export this into my document folder. Just to have a different copy. Not now. So now what we're going to do is we're going to replace this file. So as you can see, I'm in here in my Spark AR hub. You can see all the different versions that I've had. I've played a lot with this thing. We're going to update this file with our new one here. Save it. And that's it. Let me know what you think you would like to learn in the upcoming weeks. I'm going to be putting these out, man, as much as I can. I really like talking about this stuff and showing you how it works. And I'll probably end up just going through a lot of my old effects and then slowly start building new effects live, not live, but on Instagram TV and kind of showing you guys how it all works. I look forward to it. So thanks a lot.